Hi, I'm Michael Tolosa, and I'm the host of this podcast, the Layman podcast. Thanks for watching. This week, I'm here with my friend, Melissa Temme, who is an actress, and she's based in the Washington, D.C. area. And welcome, Melissa.
Hi. Thank you, Michael. I'm so excited to be here. I'm excited about your new podcast. I'm excited to talk about faith and acting and life because none of it is separate.
So, the first time I saw you was in a independent film called, well, let's just call it The Rise of the Fellowship, because I know it's gone through a few name changes. The Rise of the Fellowship, there's a guy from my church, Ron, who was kind of leading this Christian filmmakers group, and I got wind of his project, this film that he put out, and I was able to get the DVD or whatever, watch it. I didn't know anybody in the film because these were all new people to me. I was just getting into filmmaking, and you played like this role as kind of like a Galadriel role.
Yes.
In that, can you just talk about that project? Was that early in your career? Or had you done acting before, or what?
Yeah, no, that was really early. I think when I was a young child, I'm just kidding. I won't do that to you. But I had always wanted to be an actress. I had always wanted to be an actress on camera since I was little, even when I was really shy. And it's interesting because the shyness did go away, but I was probably in my mid-20s. We had moved to DC. I had a job. Maybe we'll talk about like a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 9 kind of job in DC. And the bug never left me, but I had never done much outside of like skits or maybe some larger things in college. And I had never done anything on camera. We had just had our first child. I was working a lot. My boss was wonderful, but I really came to a point where I wanted to be home with her. The Lord worked that out. It was a gift. At the same time, I thought, this will give me not extra time, but it will give me some time to pursue on-camera acting, perhaps. In the meantime, I've been taking classes. That is so important to be honing your craft. It's one thing to feel like you have a call from the Lord or that he's put something in you that you desire, that he wants to use. It's another thing it's still our responsibility to grow that thing. So I had been taking classes at a local theater. One of the major theaters in DC had a studio attached to it. And so I was taking classes there. And so I just went and got a headshot, and I ended up in this cattle call audition where it was totally the Lord. He opened up the opportunity for me to, what would you call it? Lottery. I had gotten a spot, and it was directors for all kinds of things. It was all kinds of filmmakers from the Washington, D.C. area, and they were one. So they called me in for an audition. I got the role. It was, it's a fan film, really, right? Like you already said, it's definitely connected to Lord of the Rings. It's really creative and cute the way they did it. When I got out of college, I got a job in public relations for the Salvation Army. But it's funny to me how public relations was also really foundational for me. The Salvation Army at the national level, we would do stuff with the Cowboys every Thanksgiving. And so I got to be a fly on the wall, talking with publicists, with my boss, for whoever the talent was at the time. I mean, I was staffing events. Sheryl Crow, this is back in the day. She's still amazing, but these were the people in the early 2000s who are noteworthy. My kids are like, you met the Jonas Brothers? I'm like, I did when they were like 19.
So publicity, marketing, communications, those are adjacent a lot of times to the arts, to video production, film.
Part of being an actor, and really any filmmaker, I think, especially in the DC area, is you're also doing industrials. You're doing training videos, you're doing government informational whatnots. You're doing commercials, you're doing voiceover. And so a lot of that was happening in my career at the time through local agencies. And I had started, by the time we were doing the 48-hour film project, that was really my bread and butter. And I was, at that point, I had started as a host, actually, for Audi of America. I hosted their internal news show for about 3 years. First, it was twice a month, and then it was once a month. So while we're talking about our creative lives, you know, that's where I think most actors and filmmakers would love to generally land. There's also what you're saying. There's the marketing side where actors and filmmakers are also kind of residing, which is part of how we make a living. And then there's this whole other world of like internal communications, whether corporations or government, that also needs actors and filmmakers. And all of those things are happening for most people, faith or no faith, all at the same time. The Lord works in relationship. So when we're going for training, or we're meeting, you know, with groups of filmmakers, or we go out and we make the time for a 48-hour film project, and we're humble and willing to learn and to serve in the process, you know, I'm like, oh, I'm a star, I'm a lead. I won't get you coffee. No, do you want coffee, cream or sugar? You know, I was on a project, my first, it was First Lady, my first principal role in a feature. And I remember being like, do you need coffee? And one of the other people were like, so now you're on a production that actually pays people to do that, and you're taking their job. I was like, oh, you know, I mean, you could tell how green I was in that level. And it was still an indie. When you're starting out, you want to do that, and you want to build those relationships, and all of these aspects the Lord's going to use your willingness to try, your willingness to be humble, your willingness to learn, your willingness to grow relationships and be a servant. All of that He will use to grow on your path.
Yeah. And I mean, you can't become an actor in a vacuum or in a bubble. Like you have to, like you said that you just took classes. I mean, just taking class, I took classes too. Like I took improv classes to better myself, to make myself less in my shell, to be able to talk more. And I got so many contacts from that for further things that I was involved with. So, I mean, it's like you have to take classes. You've got to network. You've got to like participate in small things, small projects or whatever, just to get to know people, and for other people to get to know you and be like, oh yeah, I remember that person who was on that set. They were awesome. You know, they were like great to be around. They're really friendly. And then so you get called to be. That's
exactly right, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have a little story about that. Actually, the producer for Audi, for the news show, she had been asked by, I think, Howard's film department, Howard University, to do to just come and speak, and how to get into the industry, one of those kinds of things for their students. And she and I were talking about what kind of advice. So she's talking from a producer's perspective. What kind of advice would you give from an acting perspective? But it always stuck with me what she said. And it's to your point, is she's like, I always want excellence. So I'm not going to hire someone who can't do the job. She's like, but I will always hire the person who is maybe not as good as the phenom if they are easy to work with, if they can take notes, if they are basically humble enough to be able to work well in a team, because otherwise it causes everyone problems. And I just thought, isn't that part of the Christian perspective though too? When we put others first, you know, my First Lady experience was like, no, there's a rhyme and rhythm to how this works, and that's not your job anymore. And there's a reason and purpose for that. And so you just need to stay in your lane, you know? So it's not like you go out and serve all the things all the time. You have to understand the structure of where you're at. But the same heart attitudes have to have that the Lord values and wants us to have. They will help you succeed in film. It's a team. They need you to be efficient. They need you to be listening. They need you to be on time. They need you to be a team. Yeah, they need you to be a team player and come ready. And you do those things as though you're doing them unto the Lord with excellence. People will call you. They will just keep calling you, and they will recommend you to other people, because everything's about reputation. Everything's about it's their reputation if they recommend you. But if you're someone who is reliable, is great to work with, and comes ready, they don't have to worry. And they know that their friend, because it's their friend. These people are friends, It's not just for business. It's not just for climbing the ladder. These are friendships they've grown. They've created things together, and that's different. So they don't want to pass somebody off on a friend, even that is going to be difficult. So,
yeah, if you're in the arts and you're a Christian, this is the classic argument in any form of art. Like I heard this a lot with bands when my brother was in a band and I was touring with them. And they were Christians and they were in the like Christian area or world. This was always the debate. Are you like, what is a Christian band? In our cases, like, what is a Christian filmmaker? Is that somebody who produces films that have, clear gospel evangelistic messages in the film? Or is it a Christian who's in the world and being salt and light within the world of filmmaking? Like, so on a set, like somebody who's a director, a Christian director, maybe is not working on a blatantly Christian story, but they are setting a Christian example on set by the practices and the culture, like you said, that they set on set. This is a person of integrity. This is a person who, refrains from some of the indulgences that you can get in that world, so
true.
So I don't think there is a one answer. I think there are people who do, and there's a place in the body of Christ for people who create evangelistic art, and there are people who that's not their role in the body. And just like, in the New Testament, I don't think we can look at one role and say, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be doing it this way, the way I do it, or whatever, So I think there's definitely room for both. And I think, we'll get into it, but your experience kind of has been on both sides of that, like working on Christian stuff and working on not Christian stuff.
Yes.
What are some of the, there's got to be some downsides to being a Christian in the film industry. Have you run into any challenges?
I think content is the constant challenge. That's the decision you're always making, right? So early on, if we had the time, I would regale you with all of the crazy things that happened to get me in this one film called Instructions Not Included.
Yeah.
And I think it was in 2 minutes. I had lines. It was, the story's, it's hilarious. To me, it's God's sense of humor. It started off with this, an audition request for a Spanish language film, and I don't speak Spanish. So I went back to the agency and I said, I would love to audition for a film, but I don't speak Spanish. And they said, oh, well, we'll go back to them. Oh, well, this part's in English. Okay. It was just thing after thing after thing until finally I auditioned. And I was on this project. And it was just the Lord. I went to sign the contract, and I've been non-union, and realized they had to go union because they were filming in LA. They flew me out. Look at me. There are a lot of me's in Los Angeles, but there was something about, again, I could go into all the detail. I won't right now, but they chose me and flew me from DC to LA. They had to go union. I signed the contract. It's many times over what we had originally talked about, but it's because they'd had to go union, and they had gotten a waiver for me because I'd been hired before they were union, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was just God's lavish provision,
Wow.
and just this marker for me. So I say this because maybe 2 years later, I'm working with this agency, a great agency out of Virginia Beach, and they call me and they say, we've put you forward for a CBS pilot, right? Wow. And I was like, hey, things are, this is the trajectory I want. And I say, great. And they send me the script. They've already put me forward. So they've put themselves out there too. You have to remember, when agencies or anyone else, like, they're putting themselves, their reputation out there too, to bank on you. And so what they ultimately, I read it. And for me as a believer, I just wasn't comfortable with the content. Now I feel like we can be in stories of redemption. We can portray characters to a certain extent. I think we also have to keep in mind what are our sensitivities, what are we susceptible to, in our own walk with the Lord, and we need wisdom for that, and often counsel. But I just wasn't. This was just something. It was just the way it was written. It just felt gratuitously like sexual, it wasn't crazy, but for me, right? And so I went back to them and I prayed about it, and I was just like, oh Lord, I don't feel good about this. I don't feel good about progressing with this. I spoke with the agency, and they were like, look, we can't, and this is right? Like, they're like, we're not in a position. They didn't say this to me, but I was not at a level where they were going to like read every script and know what my ins and outs were. Right. So they're like, we just can't put you forward for national things if you say no to this, because we've already put you forward. Now we have to go back.
Yeah.
All of that is very real in the business world. And I wanted to honor and respect that. And I was just like, oh Lord, I'm like, what do I do? And that morning I had read a scripture that said, the Lord will withhold no good thing from those who walk in integrity. And right as I was just like asking him for wisdom, and I called a friend who had done London's West End a long time. She lives in the States now. She gave me some thoughts, and all of a sudden this truck drives by with the word integrity, garage doors across the side. And I was like, okay, I just have to stay in integrity. So I called them up. I said, please, this is an opportunity. This is a pilot. Like, what's this one thing? It's just a one-time role. It's not like a recurring. I can just do this thing, even though I feel convicted, and so it was hard. It was hard. Yeah. And I explained, I told them, I expressed to them my apologies, because I understood the situation it put them in, large or small. But that I just couldn't, and I understood the consequences. I understood that why they would feel like they couldn't put me forward anymore for national stuff. Yeah. And then the reason I bring up instructions not included is because it turned into this massive win. Like, I mean, I never would have thought what it was 2 years before. The trick about that thing was nobody knew how they had gotten my name when they contacted the agency. No, to this day, we still can't figure out how they saw this Washington, D.C. actress to ask for my audition. Huh. And as soon as I got off the phone with the agency that I was talking to, the Lord immediately brought that to mind. And he was like, I just felt like, the knowing of like, when the Lord put something on your heart, that fact was brought to mind. He's like, I can do anything. I just need you to do what I need you to follow me. Yeah. And so, I was giving that up in the moment, but God can do anything. And he's had me on different paths. And since COVID, so much of my work was just coming relationally. I mean, to be honest, locally, I was rarely auditioning anymore. People were just calling and being like, hey, would you do this with us? And it was paid stuff. It was great stuff. I know when one of your projects, you connected me with Allison Howard, and she is a comedic genius.
Oh, that's right. This happened before her project.
Yes.
So this was how, okay, so I could say, hey, I connected Melissa to Allie, and they got, she got a recurring role on a web series because of that.
Because of you.
So I take credit for your career.
You should. Again, relationships. You absolutely should. You did this hilarious with your Nova group. You did this hilarious rules for small groups. And I think you like that's again, like, what are things for, right? What's the audience? This is for church people in the church. You're not evangelizing with this. This is like a satirical look at the silliness of us in the church sometimes, right? Like, you're in the family, you can kind of like have fun with
inside family jokes for Christians.
Exactly. And so it was great. It was done really well. And she was in it. And so she called me out of that. she called me because we had a good rapport. We worked, like, we could work off of each other really well, comedically. And she had this project, and she was, again, that's a vehicle. She was really creating something. Had this funny idea, ABCs of online dating. She wanted to, the ABCs, the three top characters, the three leads, each had a name starting with A, B, or C. And she was taking true stories from her friends and their online dating experiences. Yeah. So, I mean, it was a fantastic idea. And she produced.
It was funny. It was a little bit more adult than a Christian audience might.
So this is the thing. This is the thing. And I think as a believer, some of it was, I still wrestle, to be honest, with, was that the right choice for me, for who I am, for the, I mean, I have to make like, the idea is genius, right? I mean, it was hilarious how you approach an idea and what kinds of ideas, what comes out of that is going to be the vision of, and it's a secular story, and it's told from a secular viewpoint, and it's told with the secular ideas, what's acceptable at the time. There were certain aspects, like mine was very straight-laced. My character, Bree, was pretty straight-laced, but you're still engaging in ways that Melissa Temme would not have engaged, right? And you're proving certain things that, like, just by being present and not saying otherwise, that so that those are hard things. I don't know that I made the right choice in all of it. I will be perfectly honest. I'm so grateful to Allison for giving me the opportunity. The conversation to me in terms of faith is constantly comes back to content. And I think that's, I don't always have there are certain things that I just know that lines I can't cross. I had at the same time as the CBS thing, there was an HBO audition that came down the line. I mean, this is my dream, people, right? And what was listed there, I was like, oh, nope. Can't do that. So,
I mean, yeah, I guess like everyone has the line in their lives. It's kind of like what Paul's talking about with the eating meat from offered to idols. Some people are going to be okay with it. Some people are not going to be okay with it. We don't have to have the same line as Christians, but we do have to have grace for those, maybe who, I don't know. I mean, it's tricky because, I dabbled in some acting. I did some extra work while I was in DC and here in Charlotte. I was just on a film with Sydney Sweeney. Like she was like, played a boxer or something. So I was in some of those scenes. But when I was in DC, I had the opportunity to be in House of Cards, and I took advantage of it. I wanted to be on a professional set. I wanted to see how the professionals do it. This is a very big show, a lot of production value. But is that a show Christians should be watching? I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they're definitely not.
I was in the first episode. I too did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I feel like almost any actor in DC area kind of was in a scene or had the opportunity to be in House of Cards.
In Baltimore. So, yeah, absolutely.
But for me, the line wasn't, I didn't cross a line by being in that show, but I'm sure a lot of Christians would say you probably shouldn't be in House of Cards,
Right. Josh Murray, who maybe you'll have on someday.
Yeah.
I contacted him once, early on, because we had done work together on The Fellowship. We had worked together on that, and just crossed paths in a couple other ways. He was producing kind of vehicles. And I wouldn't say vehicles for himself, but he was really working hard to create in this area. And so he had invited me to participate in a couple of things. And I asked him once, I said, well, how do you decide? How do you draw your lines, And I remember, I would actually love to go back to that and look for it. But he said one aspect of it really stuck with me. And it was, there's the element of redemption. Like for your character, is there a story arc of redemption? You know, I mean, like, it doesn't have to be the case, but that's great if there is, right? If you're playing a villain and there's either they are illustrating, right, the human condition in their own way, but the overall story to the degree that you can control, or, you know, is there an element of redemption? So that's always great. But also, will it cause you personally to sin? Right? Like, we don't want to lead other people to sin, but we also don't want to, we have to guard ourselves. And in acting, I mean, all filmmaking, I'm sure, is this way to a certain degree, but in acting, you are putting yourself in the middle of the human experience of someone else. And you are pretending to be that, you know, you are, and if it's going to put you in a situation where Melissa Temme can't handle that, whether it's sexual, whatever your sensitivities might be, you know, where the Lord is still healing things in you and perfecting things, then say no. And that might be different for different people. Now, there are certain things, I know there's certain things I just, like, particular overtly sexual things and things like that, I just can't do.
Yeah.
But, you know, do you kiss somebody who's not your spouse? I mean, my kids ask me that. I've not been in that situation. Steve and I would have to talk about that. Like, and where some people are like, absolutely not, never.
Kirk Cameron, like in Fireproof, I think that was a classic story where he brought his wife in for the kissing scene.
Yeah.
And they, through film magic, made it look like the other actress.
Yeah. Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, there was one situation, I think right around the time when I basically gave up filmmaking, because I just really regretted it, where I was trying to play, you know, networker, you know, so I was like, I knew a vendor that was producing a commercial and they needed actors and actresses. And I was like, oh, let me like connect somebody that I know to this and help get them a job. So I connected you with this vendor who's filming a sandwich commercial or something, and they're trying to make it like risque. I didn't know this at the time, but
yeah.
So I bring you in, they cast you, and then I'm on the film set and I'm seeing what they're filming, and I'm like, this is really weird. I didn't know. And it was very inappropriate. It was trying to be like Carl's Jr. Ads with the models and stuff, trying to be very like sexual. Now, you weren't the actress that was being objectified, but there was another actress. And anyway, so it was embarrassing. Like when I saw the final product, I was like, I don't even want to show this to anybody. Like, I don't want to say that I was involved in this at all.
I didn't put it on my resume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just like, I don't know. I just felt embarrassed for you, and I was sorry that I even brought you involved.
But you know what? I mean, I think we only know what we can know, right? And so so for you, you're totally absolved. You hadn't seen the script, you hadn't seen anything. For me, again, this is one of those moments of like, I think I got really caught up in the audition. I saw I saw what they were trying to do. They showed storyboards. A lot of it was improv because there weren't lines. So they were really just giving you an idea of what they wanted. I was this mom, you know, and I'm with my husband, and he sees the sandwich, but he also sees the girl, you know, and they're playing off of that, as you said. Like, so this is the creative part of me who is excited to be doing a commercial for something that could be like somewhat larger, right? I just got into it, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, but the storyboards are really general, you know, and you're like, okay, sure. And we're doing the thing, and they're like, we're just not sure how we're going to end it. And I was like, oh, well, you could end it like this. Like, I'm reading my book, and I reach over and just close his mouth. And they're like, we love it. And so so they wrote in my suggestion from the audition, and then we get there, and I'm like, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? You know, like to see it all in reality, not just this fun conceptual ideas. We don't have control all the time, right? So even when you go in with the best of intentions, like that's the thing with faith, like we're having to be prayerful about it. We're having to know when we need to bow out. And I just didn't bow out. It's like, yeah, okay. It's like, I can kind of see what they're doing. And like, it's like desire for her, desire for the sandwich. I mean, I really probably should have bowed out, but like you said, we both got there and it was like, oh, and then when we saw, it wasn't just the setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the objectification. Once you saw how they filmed it, like that was the whole other layer. It was like,
yeah, and it's all slow motion with whatever, very
man.
lustful, whatever. And
Yeah.
on top of that, there was a child also. Like, so
Yes.
you, the husband, and the child is also gaping at this woman. It was
man,
not something that I would ever want to see again.
And they bought local time during
Mm-hmm.
the Super Bowl. So I started getting, I don't think I had even seen it yet. I started getting texts, which is so fun and exciting. And people are like, hey, did I just see you on a commercial during, and I was like, and I saw it and I was like, oh my God.
Super Bowl, man. You're
okay. So sometimes you're like, and a lot of people were like, wow, that's so cool. But my spiritual mom, my rock, right? Like she was like, my husband saw it and I just saw it. And she was so sweet, but she was like, I told him if Melissa had known like exactly how it was going to be, she would not have done this. Mm-hmm. I was like, I had opportunity to recognize in my naivete and in my excitement, I just participated in the process. Yeah. And I learned something. And the Lord is great and so merciful,
The way we learn is by failing. So you have to fall down to find out, hey, I need to avoid that step again.
Yeah. What's funny, though? I did feel very convicted to say something to them. Yeah, not to lambaste them. I mean, they're in business. Their client wants something. They're doing all of that and taking that into account. It may not be how I would do it, but I did approach them because in our Salvation Army background, World Services was also connected to anti-trafficking initiatives. And I just wrote them and said how grateful I was for the opportunity. And typically this is not something you do, right? Like you don't want to burn bridges. But again, as a person of faith, I felt like, I needed to really honor them. They've given me this job. They've given me this opportunity. But also in that instance, I felt like the Lord was asking me to just say something. And I'm like, at the time we only had 2 girls. And I said, I got these little girls and I'm just realizing and seeing it. I wanted to input that I think when we objectify women this way, it creates this commodity, that it contributes on a larger scale for things like taking women and children, trafficking, all these, sex slavery. And it sounds like a giant leap, but actually everything starts with our hearts and with culture.
Yeah.
Right. So I sent that to him.
I know. I remember you wrestling with that because I think you sent it to me first and we kind of gave you some feedback on that. But I was like, yes. I mean, I was equally disgusted. So
yeah. Look at us. Look at us, Michael. I forget in all the ways that we have crossed paths.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to talk about. We didn't even talk about your voiceover work or any of that. But like just to wrap things up, what's the future for Melissa Temme in filmmaking or being an actress? And how can we support you?
I think one of the things I felt like the Lord called me to for a long time was homeschooling our kids. And we have shifted from that now. We're not homeschooling as of last year. And so last year was really taking a year to calibrate. We've got a 16, 13, and 9-year-old. All of them have been in transitions. And so that last year was kind of that. This year, I've had to go back to the Lord and say, at one time I felt like you really wanted me to not promote myself. Where am I? Is that still true? And wrestling with that and wanting to do the right thing the right way. But I'm seeing these opportunities are starting to swell again. You people may not know this, or maybe you've already figured it out, but Michael Tolosa is a connector. He connects people, and he got a couple of us together, and not everybody realized that we had all worked together in different ways. And so out of that,
this is just a couple months ago during Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Yes.
I was in DC, and so.
And we had this lovely dinner. And again, I just can't emphasize this enough. People in film, people in production, they are families. They build these relationships. I don't know if it's because of the emotion that goes into it, if it's the hours, if it's just something unique to the creative world. But you build these not just business relationships, but very familial friend connections. And so it was just such a joy. It was like two-sided. It was a joy to see everyone again. I mean, it was just four of us. And it was a joy to get to do, to hear what people are doing. And we could all just be honest. We're like, what are you doing? I want to be part of that. Think of me when, and this, that, or the other. I've already taken steps where I felt encouraged. Like I've been doing voiceover. I finally got myself started on my own home studio, because when I said, when you and Gary Volker said, you don't have a setup. And I was like, no. It was like, everybody has a setup now, Melissa. But I needed that. I needed to be like, you know what? It's different now. It's different than before COVID. So we encouraged each other. We heard about what things were going on. George Escobar is doing all kinds of exciting things right now.
Try to have him on the show as well. So.
Oh, wonderful. So he's been in touch, and we're talking about some potential roles in the production company that he's putting together. And so there are things that are, the inner me is like, okay, Lord, but this takes time away from the family. This takes, it's not easy. Like First Lady was so much fun, but it was 2 solid weeks of 15-hour days, 6 days a week. And some on occasion, like they're, wanted 7, not because they were, but their schedules and their things that you have to take into account. And this is how movies are made. It's really fast and really intense. And then you're done.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so I would love prayer, because I would love to be doing the thing. But I'm trying to figure out, what does that look like for me and for my family now? And people can go to my website. People can recommend me for things.
MelissaTemme.com.
MelissaTemme.com. Yep. TEMME. I'm riding the wave right now. I'm trying to take the steps. I'm going to start taking classes again. I'm just praying about what that looks like. So I'm trying to put myself in a position to be ready to work. And I'm just riding the wave to see, like, okay, is it time now to launch out again?
Okay.
And yeah.
One of the benefits that you and I have being in marketing, promotions, or having that experience, or that those skills, is that, being an actor or trying to get out on your own, like creating platforms for yourself, you have to do a lot of self-promotion. And you got to, know a little bit about social media, because that's where people are going to follow you and all that. So there's a lot of the self-promotion aspect to being where you are right now, I would imagine.
Yes. Well, and I think, to be honest, again, I would go back to, it doesn't make sense. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It's what my dad used to say to me all the time. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. So there are, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. There are wise and practical things that we need to know how to do. Social media, all of these things are part of that, until and unless God says, but I want you to do it differently.
Don't do it.
And that's really been my journey, but I'm not sure that that's my journey now. Yeah. And so to your point, that's one of the things I'm trying to discern, like, okay, how full bore do I go?
That's funny, because I just launched this show, and then I was like, on a personal level, like at a professional level, I need like social media to promote it. But at a personal level, I was like, I need to get away from social media. But I closed, I disabled my Facebook account, even though that was the primary way that I was going to promote the show. So I'm trusting God that if I am obedient in that aspect, that he'll take care of the promotion for me.
Absolutely. I would just encourage you, this is the beauty of what you're doing, if I may say, is testimonies. Again, we need the wisdom of how people do things, right? That's important. Knowledge and wisdom. It comes from the Lord. It comes from our community of people who are doing things well. But at the same time, we also need the encouragement of people's stories. Like the Lord did it this way with you. Oh, he did it this way with you. Okay, so what I feel like I'm perceiving is not crazy, or might sound crazy, but look at you trusted. I can't tell you how many people, when I've told them, it doesn't make any sense that I wouldn't promote myself for this whole season. And yet I was working and I was doing greater and greater and greater things. And so, again, I'm not there now. And we've needed this time, I think, to recalibrate in our own home. And my husband, he is a real person with a real career and the other aspects of his life that I also need to take into account. But the Lord he does things for his glory in his love for us, right? And so when we keep that in order, things are healthier. But it also means like walking on water a lot of the time. Yeah. And that can feel uncomfortable, but he'll do really cool stuff when we give it our effort in that sense. So,
well, I appreciate it. Thanks for being here, and best of success with the next projects that fall onto your plate.
Thank you.